Certainly so, is it, Counselor? I mean, let's suppose Texas, this actually happened. Someone in Texas lets people buy specialty license plates. You know, I love little warm puppies and stuff like that. You can buy a specialty license plate. And somebody wanted to have a specialty license plate that pictured the Confederate flag. And Texas said no. And the Supreme Court said Texas doesn't have to do it, government speech. So isn't that inconsistent with what you just said?
In a tense and fascinating Senate exchange, a nominee faced two very different lines of questioning, one about something he said almost 2 decades ago in college, and another about one of the most complex issues in constitutional law, the doctrine of free speech versus government speech. On the surface, these questions seemed unrelated. First, a statement that women are better at some things, and second, whether government itself can claim free speech rights. But beneath the surface, both questions spoke to the same theme: how we define speech, who controls it, and what happens when private belief collides with public power. This article unpacks the exchange, explores the legal precedents behind it, and explains why these seemingly small courtroom battles actually shape the boundaries of free expression, gender discourse, and government power in America.
Congratulations, gentlemen. Mr. Tong, you were asked about some of the things you said back in college. And one of the things that you were asked about was a statement you made in 2004. I believe that women are simply better than men at some things. Did you say that?
I did say that, Your Honor, Senator.
You said that you believe that women are better at some things, right?
That's right, Senator.
You didn't say women are worse at some things, did you?
I did not say that, Senator.
Just want to be sure I understand. How is that denigrating women?
It was not denigrating women, and I did not intend it to be so, Senator.
Yeah. I mean, you said they're better at some things. If you said they were worse at some things, you would be denigrating women, wouldn't you?
I would, Senator.
I don't know if I asked you this, but you didn't say they could do things worse. You said better, right? Just want to be sure I understand.
That's right, Senator.
Does government have free speech rights?
Government does have free speech rights.
How so? The First Amendment doesn't mention government, except to the extent that government, it is there to protect, for government, for us to have protection against government restricting our speech. How can government have free speech?
Senator, you are right to the extent that the First Amendment refers to Congress. Congress shall not make any law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. But there is a government speech doctrine that allows the government to convey a political message it wishes to, and the government is not committed to a policy of neutrality at all times.
Have you ever been to Boston?
I have been to Boston.
Okay. You seen the Boston City Hall?
I believe I have, Senator.
There's a plaza in front, and there's some flagpoles. And Boston, when different groups are having protests or demonstrations or rallies on the plaza, allows those groups to fly their flag. Someone wanted to fly a Christian flag, and the city of Boston said no. And the Supreme Court and the city of Boston said, that's our choice. That's government speech. We don't want to fly a Christian flag. So how come the Supreme Court said that they had to fly the Christian flag if government has free speech?
Senator, if the government opens up its plaza to all comers, so to speak, then it's restricted under the public forum doctrine. in terms of what viewpoints it would decide to favor or
That's
not.
not necessarily so, is it, Counselor? I mean, let's suppose Texas, this actually happened. Someone in Texas lets people buy specialty license plates. You know, I love little warm puppies and stuff like that. You can buy a specialty license plate. And somebody wanted to have a specialty license plate that pictured the Confederate flag. And Texas said no. And the Supreme Court said Texas doesn't have to do it, government speech. So isn't that inconsistent with what you just said?
Senator, it is not inconsistent. This area of law is extremely complicated when something qualifies as a public forum such that viewpoint discrimination might not be allowed versus a public benefit and public conditions that the government can rightly impose on others, on its recipients. Then that shades into government speech, in which case the government would have more control over what kind of speech gets projected into the public square. But there is potential for tension there between the two doctrines that you raised, Senator.
The chairman's going to gavel me to shut up in a second. I just want to be sure I understand. Back at Yale, you said there are some things that women are better at, right?
Yes, Senator.
Not worse.
That's right.
Better.
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In a recent Senate exchange, the line of questioning moved in two directions that, at first glance, appeared unrelated, but on closer inspection revealed deep commonality. On one hand, a nominee was asked about a remark he had made years ago in college, a statement from 2004 in which he declared that women are simply better than men at some things. On the other hand, he was pressed on a highly complex constitutional issue, whether government itself has free speech rights. Although these questions seem worlds apart, one about gender discourse, the other about constitutional doctrine, they both revolve around the same fundamental theme: the meaning of speech, who gets to define it, and how interpretation shapes political and legal outcomes. The first strand of questioning reveals how words spoken long ago can resurface to shape public perception. In college, as a young man, the nominee had stated that women were better at certain things than men. In today's environment, even seemingly complimentary remarks can be scrutinized under a microscope. The concern is not simply what was said, but what it implies, how it might be interpreted, and how it can be used politically. The senator questioning him understood this dynamic. Instead of condemning the statement or suggesting that it reflected outdated gender stereotypes, he reframed it. He asked repeatedly for clarification. Did you say women are better? Yes. Did you say women are worse? No. You didn't denigrate women, you actually praised them, right? Yes. Through this exchange, the senator essentially rehabilitated the nominee's past words, casting them as positive rather than negative. This tactic highlights a truth about modern political hearings. Character is not judged solely by what one has done in office, but by what one has said throughout life, even in youth. Nominees are expected to account for statements made decades earlier, sometimes in casual or academic contexts, and to explain or defend them under today's standards. In this case, the senator took what could have been a liability and turned it into a strength by framing the remark as a compliment. But it also underscores the fragility of language in public life. A single phrase can be reinterpreted in different ways, depending on who controls the narrative. The remark, "women are better at some things," could be understood as a nod to the strengths of women or as a subtle reinforcement of stereotypes, depending on the lens through which it is viewed. That tension between intent and interpretation is central not only to this exchange, but also to the broader debate about free speech in America. The questioning then pivoted sharply from personal remarks to constitutional law. The senator asked, does government have free speech rights? At first blush, the question seems odd. The First Amendment is written as a shield against government power, not as a grant of speech to the government itself. It begins, "Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press." It is directed at Congress, and by extension, other government bodies, forbidding them from restricting the speech of the people. The premise is that free speech is a right of individuals, a tool to protect the citizen against the state. And yet, over decades of constitutional interpretation, the courts have carved out what is now known as the government speech doctrine. This doctrine recognizes that the government itself often needs to communicate messages to the public. If the government wants to promote public health campaigns, urging citizens to quit smoking, wear seatbelts, or get vaccinated, it must be able to adopt messages without being forced to give equal time to contrary viewpoints. If the military advertises for recruitment, it cannot be compelled to also fund anti-recruitment campaigns. Government speech, in this sense, is not about silencing individuals, but about the state exercising its role in communicating with its people. The nominee explained this doctrine carefully. He acknowledged that while individuals are shielded from government suppression of their speech, the government itself does retain the ability to project its own views. But the complexity emerges when the government creates spaces where private individuals can also express themselves. Is the space a public forum open to all, or is it a platform for government speech under the control of the state? That distinction determines whether the government must be neutral or whether it can selectively choose which messages to endorse. The senator illustrated this tension with two Supreme Court cases. The first was Showdown v. City of Boston, 2022. In this case, Boston City Hall had 3 flagpoles. 2 displayed official flags, but the third was often used by private groups hosting events in the public plaza. Over the years, hundreds of flags had been flown there representing different heritages, causes, and organizations. But when a Christian group sought to fly a Christian flag, the city refused, citing concerns about separation of church and state. The case reached the Supreme Court, which ruled against Boston. The court held that because the flagpole had historically been opened as a forum to private groups, the city could not discriminate based on viewpoint. To exclude a Christian flag when others had been allowed was unconstitutional. Once a space becomes a public forum, government must practice viewpoint neutrality. The senator then raised another case, Walker v. Texas Division, Sons of Confederate Veterans, 2015. Texas allowed citizens to design specialty license plates, often featuring causes like environmentalism, cultural symbols, or sports teams. One group applied to design a plate featuring the Confederate battle flag. Texas refused. The group sued, arguing that this was viewpoint discrimination. But in this case, the Supreme Court sided with Texas. The court reasoned that license plates are a form of government speech. Because plates carry the imprimatur of the state, they are perceived as government-sanctioned messages. Therefore, Texas had the right to decide what symbols it would and would not endorse. The two cases taken together expose the tension in this area of constitutional law. In one scenario, government was forced to allow a religious symbol because it had opened a space as a public forum. In the other, government was allowed to reject a symbol because the medium was considered government speech. The nominee acknowledged this complexity, noting that the doctrines overlap and sometimes appear inconsistent. The question always turns on context. Is the medium traditionally used for government expression, or has it been open to private voices? When it is the former, government can control the message. When it is the latter, government must remain neutral. This may seem like an abstract legal debate, but the stakes are enormous. These decisions define who controls public symbols and how inclusive public spaces must be. Consider the implications. If a city allows murals on its walls, can it reject a religious or controversial mural? If a school district allows student clubs to use bulletin boards, can it ban certain viewpoints? If a state issues specialty plates, does the design represent the driver or the government? Each of these situations forces us to wrestle with the same underlying question. Where does private speech end and government speech begin? The larger significance lies in how these principles affect freedom and pluralism in America. If the government too tightly controls public spaces, it risks stifling diversity of viewpoints. If it opens every space indiscriminately, it may appear to endorse ideas that conflict with its own constitutional values. For example, allowing a Confederate flag plate could be seen as government endorsement of a symbol many view as racist, while banning it could be seen as government censorship of heritage expression. The courts must walk a fine line, and their rulings shape the contours of civic life. What makes this Senate exchange fascinating is how the two topics, gender remarks and government speech, actually mirror each other. Both are about the politics of interpretation. Just as the nominee's statement about women could be viewed as praise or as stereotyping, so too can a flag or a license plate be seen as heritage or as hate. Just as a remark can be reframed by political opponents, so too can government action be recast as neutrality or censorship depending on perspective. In both cases, meaning is not fixed but contested. The senator's rhetorical strategy was clear. By pressing the nominee on whether he had said better rather than worse, he framed the meaning of the college remark in the most favorable light. By raising contrasting Supreme Court cases, he highlighted the uncertainty in constitutional doctrine and tested the nominee's ability to navigate nuance. The entire exchange was not merely about past words or legal theory, but about demonstrating competence, judgment, and resilience under questioning. The episode also reveals something about the current state of American politics. In an era of polarization, speech is constantly under scrutiny. What one side sees as harmless, the other side may label harmful. What one side views as free expression, the other may call hate speech. And government itself is often caught in the middle, expected to protect free speech while also being pressured to suppress harmful or offensive messages. These tensions will not go away. If anything, they will intensify as America becomes more diverse and more polarized. The questions raised by the senator about words spoken in youth and about government's role in expression are part of a broader cultural and legal struggle over who gets to define meaning in the public square. The courts will continue to play a central role, but so too will politicians, activists, and ordinary citizens. For at its core, free speech is not only a legal doctrine, but a lived experience, shaped by culture, politics, and perception. Ultimately, the Senate exchange serves as a reminder of two truths. First, words matter, even decades after they are spoken. Their meaning can be contested, reframed, and weaponized, but they cannot be erased. Second, the boundaries of free speech are fluid, especially when government is both a regulator and a speaker. The doctrines of public forum and government speech will continue to evolve, and with them, the limits of expression in American democracy. The nominee's ability to navigate these questions under pressure shows not just legal knowledge, but political awareness, an understanding that in today's world, the battle over speech is as much about perception as it is about law. This Senate exchange reminds us of two truths. First, in public life, words matter long after they are spoken. Even well-meaning remarks can be twisted or weaponized. Second, the boundaries of free speech are not always clear, especially when the speaker is the government itself. From Boston's flags to Texas license plates, courts continue to wrestle with where private expression ends and government messaging begins. At its heart, this debate is about the same core principle: freedom. Freedom to speak, freedom to believe, and freedom to disagree about what those freedoms mean. And as America becomes more divided, these questions will only grow more urgent.